Good morning to TNN viewers. Good morning, Minister Jason Hayward. Thank you for inviting me and to bring us up to date on some initiatives that you brought to the public. Your introduction?
Well, certainly it's always a pleasure to engage in an interview with you, T. Lindsay. We have a number of initiatives, whether it be minimum wage, whether it be increase in social protections, or the economic development strategy that we released. It shows that the government has a human-centered approach to the work that we're doing. I'm pleased with the fact that we were able to effectively establish a minimum wage on June 1st, 2023. We're progressing through financial assistance reform, and we've just released a robust economic development strategy which will chart a course for economic growth and development over the next 4 years.
Are you satisfied with, especially with minimum wage, are you satisfied that that's enough?
I'm satisfied that that is an appropriate starting point. And so persons are always, will always have an opinion. Some believe it's too high, some believe it's set too low, but I believe it's an appropriate starting point based off the recommendations that were provided by the Wage Commission. In addition to that, we didn't want to set an initial minimum wage which was too high. That created a level of shock to our economic system. And so we believe that the minimum wage that was set was appropriate, and there's always room to approve and adjust that minimum wage moving forward.
I've had a few calls, individuals give me questions to offer you. Local workers feel that this has benefited the guest worker. What is your take? What poll have you done to show who this benefits more?
It benefits all workers, and so I don't want to get into a category of who it benefits more. There are certainly Bermudians that fall into the category of making below $16.40 who are now making $16.40. There are a lot of gas workers that fall into that pool. The key was that we've now cut out that level of exploitation for some workers within our community, and that's something I'm certainly proud about. We continue to monitor the situation, and we ask persons to call in with any other concerns to the Department of Labor, and the Department of Labor then has regular contact with the minister as it pertains to some of the things that they're hearing and how some employers are actually trying to circumvent the minimum wage, but when we have further dialogue with those employers, we see an adjustment is actually being made.
Has there been any complaints or pushback from employers, one, and complaints from employees, two, that they're not receiving their increase?
Both. And so some has to do with the reporting period, and so some employers had indicated to employees that they are not paying a minimum wage rate, but a contact from the Labor Department to those employers. And then when we looked at their salaries at the end of the pay period, we saw that employers progressed to that minimum wage rate. In other areas, you see where they try to circumvent employers by saying that somebody over the age of 18 is still a student, but that's not allowed. Anybody over the age of 18 is subject to the minimum wage rate, while everybody underneath 18 is not subject to the minimum wage rate.
How has the feedback been thus far? This just came into law. So how has the feedback been?
Generally, everybody feels as though it's a positive step in the right direction. Some feel as though the minimum wage of $16.40 is still too low based off of our economy. I understand that argument, but like I indicated, this is a wage floor and a reasonable first step. Moving forward, we will progress the minimum wage rate in Bermuda.
How many years you think you might increase? You're just going to wait to see when do you think you might even look into? This just came into to being, so you have a window, 3 to 5 years.
Well, I will consult with the Wage Commission as it pertains to their recommendations. Some countries progress annually, some progress every on a 2-year period. Certainly, I won't be comfortable with anything outside of 2 years.
What is your greatest concern with this new legislation?
The greatest concern is that employees some employees will be abused and not report that they're not receiving that minimum wage because they have fear that they will be the contract of employment will expire, and that is something that is extremely unfortunate if that's taking place within our society.
Does guest workers have a hotline or so they can report anonymously?
Yeah, we ask them and encourage them to call the Department of Labor 297-7716 and speak to a labor inspector or speak to the labor relations manager so that they can get advice on how to proceed moving forward. An area where we needed to put out a press statement to provide clarity was around domestic workers. It's unfortunate some of the treatment that our domestic workers receive in terms of the hours that are required to work and the pay that they receive. We wanted to make it abundantly clear that every living domestic worker is subject to the conditions in the Employment Act and subject to a minimum wage rate. And to that effect, we'll be releasing a press statement today indicating that they are subject to those particular provisions. We can't utilize our guest workers as if they're slaves. These are human beings and they deserve to work in dignity, notwithstanding they live within somebody's household.
Who would you consider to be a domestic worker?
You have living caregivers, and so they're not just caregivers, they do everything under the sun, whether it's wash the dog, feed the dog, wash the dishes, do the family laundry. You see it stacked in terms of they're required to do everything on a daily basis. Watch the senior parent, watch the kids, and so take them to school. And so when we start to talk about the hours of work is becoming unlimited. And even if we've had complaints where a living individual on their day off wants to go and spend an evening with a friend, and they're prohibited from doing so and things of that nature. And so we want to make it clear that these people are subject to holidays, these individuals are subject to vacation leave, they're subject to rest periods, and they're subject to a minimum wage rate.
Would you consider that abuse?
Most definitely.
And they have an avenue to report these incidents?
Yes, and so what we encourage them to do as best as possible, contact the Labor Department. For example, the Filipino Association will reach out for clarity on a number of areas, and they will liaise directly with the Labor Department on behalf of some of their members.
And they are a part of this minimum wage gamut?
Yes, they are employees, and as a result, they are subject to minimum wage rates.
Is the ministry aware, or is there a racket of all of these domestic workers that are brought in? So do you have a racket of who and where they might be working?
Well, certainly they will all be on work permits, and the work permit will specify the household that they will be residing in. And so there is a racket of the number of domestic workers and the households that they actually reside in or work for.
Okay, let's see if we can change gears. Closed categories.
Mm-hmm.
You gave a release a few weeks ago about closed categories. Is there any abuse in or are employers abiding by the closed category statute?
Generally they are, and I would say generally they are because immigration is not approving any permits in those particular areas. Now, for example, if you have somebody in a work place and they are working in a closed category job and they haven't had permission to do so, most times immigration will feel a complaint from a fellow employee around the behaviors that they're observed in the workplace or a member of public as it pertains to that. But another portion of that is that it's not clearly identified who's Bermudian. So a lot of complaints come in to say this non-Bermudian is working, when in actual fact, when you look at the person's credentials, they do have permission to work in those particular areas, or they are Bermudian.
Meaning what, married to a Bermudian?
They could be married to a Bermudian, or they know in a PRC category. And so we have a number of categories which persons are not on work permits, and that they're non-Bermudian.
I don't want to pick on a specific group of persons here, but we see Filipinos in the grocery stores, cashiers, Filipinos in the fast food industry, and and there's a lot of Bermudians that are not working.
Mm-hmm.
And the question that I've been sent to ask is, how is this happening? We've got Bermudians that are unemployed,
Right.
and guest workers that are in specific jobs that Bermudians can do.
So this is what I'm cautioning you. You can't assume that that individual is not Bermudian.
Okay.
And so you have Filipinos or people from a Filipino nationality that are married to Bermudians.
Okay.
And so you can't determine that that person is illegally working in that particular position. Cashiers have been a closed category for some time. There is only limited scope for a person to work in cashier where the cashiering is not their primary function. For example, if you may work in a small beauty salon, the person that works in the beauty salon may be able to, like a barber, may be able to cashier in that capacity as well. Or if somebody is a manager and they're just providing relief for a period of time as a cashier. But generally, there's store clerks and cashiers have been closed categories, and so you won't typically find non-Bermudians in those areas. And because those areas are also areas that are high frequented by Bermudians, Bermudians typically will complain, and we're able to adjudicate that matter swiftly.
Let me state it again publicly. I am not attacking the Filipino guest worker.
Mm-hmm.
It's just some queries that's been sent to me. Next is we see a lot of Jamaican landscapers.
Mm-hmm.
That are, got businesses now.
Yes.
And a lot of Bermudians have been concerned about that. I guess that's being monitored too, to make sure that every T is dotted, crossed, and every I is dotted.
Most definitely. So in order for them to have a local business, it means that it is a Bermudian business. We still have the 60-40 rule for those business categories. And as a result, the majority of time there's a Bermudian who has 60% equity in the company and 60% ownership. And so we make a lot of assumptions, but when we do our investigations, they're not always accurate, the assumptions that are made. We do have a high number of non-Bermudians in landscaping and horticulture trades. And as I speak to the industry, it is a real difficulty in retaining persons within that occupational category. It's not easy work. The pay is not glamorous. And as a result of it being demanding work and low pay, they do have a challenge with retaining Bermudians in that particular area. Notwithstanding that, the ministry will work with the Department of Workforce Development to increase Bermudians in all areas of skills trades. I will be passing legislation, hopefully in this parliamentary period, where we're reforming the National Training Board to a National Certification and Apprenticeship Board, which primarily focuses on skilled trades. And we want to see more apprenticeship programs in the areas of skilled trade, whether it be construction, plumbing, air conditioning, refrigeration, auto mechanics. And we want to also increase the number of Bermudians that are actually going into those occupational categories.
Minister, what might you say to a lot of employers that say that it's hard to find Bermudian workers, young men that usually fit this criteria, and they come work on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They might come on Thursday, but they're there Friday, and once they get paid, it's their. Have you heard that? Because that seems to be the excuse. Or it might just be a fact.
Yeah.
That it's hard to find, and I've heard even Bermudian contractors, that it's very hard to find reliable Bermudian workers.
So I had a conversation with a Bermudian construction company owner, and he says, you know what, when I started my business, I wanted to do it the right way. I wanted to hire all Bermudians. He says to me, Minister, it just couldn't work. It wasn't sustainable. I've got projects to complete, guys are not showing up for work, and he went through the number of opportunities that he's given to Bermudians. Guys that stop on the street and are hungry for work, but then when I actually get in the workplace, can't maintain employment for a long period of time. This is part of our reality, but this is part of what we're also trying to do in terms of when we're talking about creating signature schools, ensuring that our young people have employability skills coming out of school so that they can filter right into apprenticeship programs and be successful in industry. We want to ensure that they understand what work ethic is required in the workplace. And so we will continue to work with our young people. That notwithstanding that is a reality in some, there are some dynamic young people, and so I don't want to give the impression that all young people create challenges for employers. But the reality is that some do. You have people that receive their first paycheck and don't show up for work the next week. Some people call in sick in advance. Like this week, you already tell your employer that I won't be in on Monday. These are some of the realities. And I spoke with, for example, the cleaning industry. In order for me to remove cleaners from closed categories, I asked the cleaners to provide evidence of their hiring history, who they've hired, and state the scenario as to why they're no longer employed. The long list of Bermudian names and when I looked at some of the information on the paper that was actually written, some of it's kind of disheartening to know that an employer had to go through that experience just to retain employees. But I also know that an employer has to work on their workplace culture to facilitate an environment that is conducive to young people entering the industry. It's very difficult to try to attach a Bermudian with a crew of individuals who don't primarily speak English and want to fit into a culture that already exists. And so some level of integration needs to happen in terms of from the employer side, so that there's a welcoming culture for our young people to be successful in these career or occupational categories.
Some of the issues that we're having with our young black man, are that the job they've due to some of their choices have shifted the job market where they can't go certain areas. How do we fix that?
That's going to be difficult. But what I see is people transitioning out of gang culture. And so at a young age, that's more of a problem. But as persons progress past the age of 30, you see that they make a shift. And sometimes it's prison that changes them. Sometimes it's having a child that changes them. Or just some reality where they've matured out of a certain social group. And I do see persons who, when we were young, couldn't go into certain areas, now in those particular areas comfortably. And what we want to do is encourage people to understand that you can transition out of that particular lifestyle. Not always easy, but we will continue to work with our young persons. And having more space in our community where young people from different areas can integrate creates less of a challenge than keeping people isolated. And then the next time they see each other, it's still on contact.
What do you say to the notion that some Bermudians say that this administration is more keen to the guest worker, to bringing in the guest worker? When there's a shortage of I guess, Bermudians, you have to go overseas.
I think the statistics don't actually support that. And so here's what I'll say. There are more jobs in Bermuda than able-bodied Bermudians to fill those jobs. And so we want to maximize the capacity of employment for Bermudians. What I do see is a realistic shift. Bermudian unemployment is down. Bermudian employment is up above pre-pandemic levels. So Bermudians are getting jobs. The unemployment rates are down. More persons are working than when we entered the pandemic and then we had the economic downturn. It was a difficult 2 years. And so we can't erase that the pandemic created an economic shock and it was a difficult two years for Bermudians. But now we're beginning to see a rebound. I know for a fact when we look at work permits and we see a suitably qualified Bermudian, we're calling that Bermudian to determine whether or not they're still interested in that job, and they're indicating to us that they find alternative employment. Okay. And so there are options available. Even to the extent where we now see increase in internships, increase in summer employment for our young people as well.
So what is the unemployment figure for today?
I'll be releasing that
Give us a prelude.
Document.
Give us a prelude.
I'll give you an exclusive, Trevor. I'll give you an exclusive. Our unemployment rate in 2019 was roughly around 3.8%. In 2020, right after the pandemic, it went up to over 7.5%. We are now just over 3%. So our unemployment rate is lower than it was in
Now 4%.
2019 and lower than what was recorded in 2020.
That's good news. And facts to back that.
Yes, youth unemployment is chopped more than half.
Oh, good stuff.
And so the statistics will show that we're trending in the right direction. We have these positive trends and we still have large hotels which are closed. When Bermudiana Beach opens up, Fairmont Southampton gets back online, some of the other hotel properties that are now closed and looking to redevelop get back online, we're going to have more jobs in our economy in a number of occupational categories where Bermudians have choice again.
So you're feeling good about the direction you see employment trending?
I think the trend is positive. I won't feel good until we actually see a connection between our Bermudians and those job opportunities. I don't feel good about knowing that there's going to be large-scale construction development and then we have a construction fair and the attendance to that fair is extremely low, where persons are not registering, which means that we will most likely have to import a large labor force to participate in a number of developments that will be taking place.
Would you consider that fair was advertised sufficiently?
I think we done as best as possible to advertise, and I won't say we because it wasn't a government thing, but government did piggyback on a system with the promotion of the advertising. I did see it run in the newspaper and on Burn News for a long period of time, and so it was certainly a lead up prior to that. Notwithstanding that, the advertisement is not the end-all be-all, but that's not the only job fair where we haven't seen a robust level of demand from Bermudians. We had the hospitality job fair, and that wasn't overly subscribed or well attended by Bermudians seeking employment, which indicates to me that there is career options available to individuals within our economy. The survey that we'll release will let us know how much persons are still out there actively looking for work, but we can't shy away from the fact that a number of job seekers have also left the island as well.
Is there any thought to bringing back some of those Bermudians that, and we still have people that are leaving Bermuda. Just last night I saw a family leave, a group of Bermudians, a family of Bermudians leaving for England. How, is there any thought, first of all, of bringing back or enticing persons to come back home? And how do you think that is possible?
So a key portion of the economic development strategy we release has the strategic priority 5 is people. Underneath that people strategy, we want to identify the reasons for emigration, and we want to do it in a very measured way, so we can be clear on what some of the challenges are, so that we can have the right remedy to those particular challenges. Many would say we should already know that, but we'll do our due diligence so that we get the data we require to make informed decisions. But that is the aim, to attract some Bermudians back to the island. Now, emigration is not 100% a bad thing, where persons go away for greater levels of opportunity. I think as the world becomes more global and they understand that this is a realistic option for them, sometimes individuals feel that Bermuda is too small. But those that go because they feel as though they simply can't survive, yes, we have to do better at supporting those individuals and assisting them in their transition back to the island. How we do that, we will certainly work out that strategy, but that's part of our plan, is to seek to have as much Bermudians return home as humanly possible. We don't want to see a human resource sharing. And it works against us because we have an aging population, which means there are tons, I won't say tons, but there are thousands of Bermudians that will be transitioning out of the workforce based off of being in that baby boomer population. And as a result, there's going to be need for local workers in our local workforce, and so we want to ensure that we maximize that as much as we possibly can.
Any thoughts of allowing some of those at their retirement age to continue on for a year or two?
Yeah, certainly. I struggle with this 65 and out. I do, as from a personal
People still
standpoint.
young and hard
Yeah,
at
I struggle.
65.
No, but not just young and hard. They have the physical capacity, they have the mental capacity, so there's no reason for that person to exit the workplace at 65. And so, you know, the government has transitioned to the age of 68, and we will be encouraging the rest of society to move in that particular direction. I know that we're making some reforms as it pertains to our pension, and hopefully that encourages persons to retain employees within the workplace longer than the age of 65. But employers will also understand that they can't continue with transitioning people out at 65 because we don't have a flow of young persons that's going to be able to replace that talent.
So it's just across the board? 68 is across the board?
68 is for government. We're going to try to encourage persons to retain employees as long as they possibly can across the board.
Minister, are you satisfied and happy with the way you see your ministry going? Or what is your challenges?
I can never use the word happy as being a government representative, but we are making significant progress in the right direction, and satisfied that the work that we are doing is actually translating into a meaningful impact for the lives of Bermudians. The reforms that we're making to financial assistance is certainly going to help the families of Bermuda, undoubtedly. The minimum wage certainly helped families of Bermuda. As it pertains to economic development strategy, it's certainly going to create more opportunities for not just Bermudian workers, but Bermudian entrepreneurs as well. And so a robust economy services all of us. And my view is that we want the, as the tide rises, all boats rise with that particular tide. And so what you don't hear us talking about is anything talking about trickle down. We want a power from the bottom up.
We have a lot of seniors that have applied for financial assistance. Is the application process a little different for the seniors than there are for the young?
Yeah, there are different rules for seniors, and you can just share by the sheer volume of the majority of our applicants being seniors. They have an easier pathway to financial assistance. We've recognized that when seniors get on financial assistance, they typically stay on, and we support them through that particular journey. I have no concern with the level of support that we provide our seniors, and with the reforms that we're making, we're going to change the table of allowable expenses. So all of our seniors, all of our disabled, all of our low-income earners, and able-bodied individuals will receive increased benefits moving forward.
Another question: what is the process for those seniors that might have property, might have their earned home, but they have no income, they have no disposable income at all?
So a senior is able to have retained property and be on financial assistance.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
No, when you move into multiple properties, that becomes an issue, but having one property is no challenge for a senior to get on financial assistance.
And the abuse process, is that curtailed now for the youngest, for some of those that have been on financial assistance forever?
Well, I wouldn't say for that. Right now, we have a period of time where persons can remain on financial assistance for 7 years. But obviously, people were on financial assistance prior to that 7-year window opening. But after 7 years, we don't have a hard stop anymore, and so we will be implementing the legislation which says that persons will still be able to receive food allowance, health insurance, and a room rate until they can get back on their feet. And that is just enough to support somebody, but not enough to encourage someone to remain on financial assistance indefinitely.
I'm at this question. I never want time, but I'm at this question. You might be able to answer this question, because I'm going to throw this one at you. that the government gives specific food places, grocery stores, a very hefty percentage, and prices are still extremely high. How can the government inquire about these particular two marketplace facilities, not marketplace, but two grocery entities are receiving financial assistance with high prices? Is government looking to discuss that they can see if they can bring those prices down?
Certainly through the Cost of Living Commission, that is the work that is actually being done in terms of trying to reduce the price of goods within our grocery stores. Food prices have been
Which is a win-win for them.
Yeah,
they're getting automatic funds and jacking the prices up. My words.
Yeah, right. And so we have to identify whether or not gouging is taking place and to what extent. And I think the Cost of Living Commission is best placed to identify that and the challenges around the cost of food in Bermuda. The food inflation on an annual basis is ranging around 10%. That is way too high. On top of the already high prices that we were paying. I know that some work had been done to reduce the price of a number of staple items, and that should be reflected in the basket of goods. But more work needs to be done in that particular space. And so the best way to identify whether or not the gouging is taking place is looking at these grocers' profitability. If we see that their profit margins continue to increase, then we know that there is capacity to reduce prices within our economy.
And we may really add out there, add it before we conclude.
No, certainly this government has demonstrated that it has had a human-centered approach. We're committed to policy objectives that actually support the well-being of our people. There are a number of policy objectives that we still have to implement that will provide further support to the people of Bermuda. And I want to be clear that this ministry and this government, we operate with the people of Bermuda at heart, because we know that if we don't, well, why are we here? Mm-hmm. And once my political journey is over, I have to absorb to being back to being a regular member of society and live amongst the exact same persons who I was trying to bring forward. And so I just want everybody to be cognizant of that. It's not always easy. There are different expectations to meet, and people have different expectations as it pertains to what they expect from the government, but we are putting our best foot forward in a number of areas to try to ensure that Bermuda is a better place for all.
Wouldn't you agree that I know that there's decisions are to be made by the administration, but consultation is paramount?
Certainly. We need to continue to engage with the people. It's something that we was continuously repeated at Brother Artist's funeral, and it was, you stay with the people and the people will stay with you. And I think that's a mantra that every politician should have.
I appreciate that. Give an honor to Brother Artie.
Yeah.
His family be comforted in this most difficult time.
Yes, definitely. He was certainly an icon in our society.
Bless you. Thank you, Minister.
Always a pleasure, T. Lindsay.
For those that have been joining us, we thank you for this one-on-one with Minister Jason Hayward. Stay tuned. TNN to the world.